from tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Wait.
I'm speaking.
No, I'm not going to waste my time on a virtual debate. That's not what debating's all about. You sit behind a computer and do a debate. It's ridiculous. And then they cut you off whenever they want.
If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as Vice President? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election.
Welcome to Foursquare, the digital video show where politicals get together, chop up the news of the week. My name is Eugene Daniels, your host. Joining me virtually, Ryan Lizza, who is the only OG panelist today. Both Tim Alberta and Laura Barone Lopez are out reporting. So we brought along our friends Tina Nguyen, White House reporter, and Alex Thompson, national political reporter. Thank you guys for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Let's get into it. We're going to start with counter-programming. Each of you have 30 seconds, newbies, to take people's minds off a little bit on the wild world we live in, something that we're not covering today, and give people news that they can use. I'm going to start with Tina.
This is really not in the realm of politics whatsoever, but the sci-fi epic Dune has been delayed. The release was supposed to be for Christmas, but this wonderful, wonderful sci-fi movie starring Timothée Chalamet, who is a wonderful, wonderful actor, will be delayed until next year. Now, normally I would just be bereft of not having any big tentpole sci-fi movies, but this is maybe the third giant release that's been delayed. Like, we've got no James Bond this Christmas, no Wonder Woman, no Marvel movies, and that actually might have a ripple effect on the entire movie industry. So we are probably going to see several thousand actual cinemas closing, and that's bad. Also, Dune would not look good on the small screen. I'm sorry.
I don't want it. I did have to watch Mulan at home, which I really didn't want to, but I did anyway because I wanted to see it in a theater. Can't do it right now. Alex, how about you?
Well, let me add, I don't think Mulan was very good on a big
Oh my God!
It wouldn't have been good on a big screen or a small screen. But my counter-programming, don't interrupt me. My counter-programming is that, like, the relationship between Biden and Facebook is getting trickier and messier with every pressing day. You're seeing the campaign really up the pressure on Facebook to either police the platform better, to not approve certain ads, to do better fact-checking. Meanwhile, the House committee released this 440-page report basically saying that, like, big tech companies are monopolies and have abused their power. Meanwhile, in the Biden transition team, you have a former Facebook board member who was a Facebook board member until earlier this year, is taking the lead on a lot of hires. They just elevated to general counsel, former Facebook executive, and you have another Facebook former board member, Erskine Bowles, also sort of in the mix. And so there's just like a trickiness to the relationship that, should Biden win, is just going to get messier and more complicated.
Facebook, always some drama with Facebook. Ryan, how about you?
That's super interesting. Well, this is a story that is at the top of, will be front page news tomorrow, but we're not going to talk about it today. And that is that these alleged militia members in Michigan, the FBI announced today, apparently hatched a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. And they had been monitoring these guys. They had scoped out her vacation home, and they looks like they busted up the operation just as they started talking about securing some explosives this week. So, sometimes I'm skeptical when the FBI puts out one of these reports. It could just be, sometimes it's a couple of knuckleheads who were talking about something and it wasn't ever going very far. This looks like, even if they are knuckleheads, looks like they were legitimately planning to do this, at least according to the FBI. So a kind of wild plot there that obviously has implications in terms of our politics and what Whitmer's political reputation was in the state of Michigan and what led to this. So big story there that we're not going to get to today. Under 30 seconds, right?
Also, yeah, viewers, he promised me he would do this in 30 seconds. That was not 30 seconds, per usual. I just have the bar so low for Ryan on the show. I say 30 seconds, so I allow it. Wednesday night was the first and only vice presidential debate of the cycle. Current VP Mike Pence and California Senator Kamala Harris sat down a dozen feet apart, separated by some plexiglass that the Trump campaign didn't want to be on the stage to begin with. There weren't many surprises. Luckily, it felt like a debate, unlike the one last week. But here's some of the moments people are still talking about from last night.
The American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country.
When you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. It looks a little bit like plagiarism.
The vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't you all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm. This is important.
Susan,
I want to
have
add,
to weigh
but
in
if,
here.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. So I want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back?
If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as vice president? What would you personally do?
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more.
Luckily for the American people, all of us, it was light years away from the debacle their bosses had last week. There was a lot more policy last night. Both ignored Susan Page's questions often and kind of answered whatever they wanted. Kind of how this show works. They just ignore whatever I ask and just answer whatever the hell they want. For the first 20 minutes, it seemed like Harris kind of hit the jackpot on topics. COVID-19, which has killed more than 200,000 Americans, and the economy, where millions of Americans are still out of work. Ryan, these feel like two issues Americans are thinking about the most right now. It's in your face. They impact all of us in different ways. How did Pence do on defending Trump's mismanagement of the management or mismanagement of the pandemic and the economy?
Well, I'd like to talk, Eugene, about Kamala Harris.
See, here we go.
Look, the bar was so low after Trump kind of like blew up the last debate. So this debate looked a lot more like, debates used to look like. Two, kind of polished, smart politicians skirting the rules as much as they could, emphasizing their own talking points, ignoring the questions, kind of doing the traditionally annoying things that politicians do, but not in the, nothing like what happened with Trump at the last debate. Probably a little bit more of ignoring the questions than we see in most debates. I mean, that clip you just played, Susan Page asked him basically, if Trump doesn't accept the results of the election, what are you going to do? And he just completely ignored it. And she, unfortunately, did not follow up. Seems like a pretty important question. So I think he did pretty well, considering that the hand Pence has been dealt and how difficult it is to defend the administration's handling of the pandemic. I thought, he's pretty gifted in these settings. And he often had, even when he didn't answer a question or couldn't defend the pandemic response record, he had something planned about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden being really left wing. So, I don't think he fell on his face for sure. This is kind of a cliche, but the Biden and Harris are up by, looks like almost 10 points. And there was nothing that Pence could really do to change that dynamic. So, kind of a tie goes to who's ahead. So this is not one of those debates that is going to change a whole lot in this race.
Brian, you have a story on right now for the people. The VP debate offers the nation a glimpse of a post-Trump future. Take a look, because I think that's kind of exactly what we're seeing and how, whether it's this year or in another 4 years, what the Republican Party might look like and how they might speak. Alex, VP debates don't move the needle. So the question of will this change minds, does it really feel like it applies here? But does it tell us anything, what we saw last night, does it tell us anything about how these campaigns are going to attack each other moving forward? Or are they just sticking to a script we've already seen? Has anything changed?
Well, I don't think anything has changed. And I actually think that it doesn't even matter. If Mike Pence wanted to have a certain message, it wouldn't even matter because Trump would railroad it the next morning, which is actually what happened. The way I think this debate was the most revealing, though, is that this is probably the VP debate where you have the highest chance of either of these candidates becoming president, given the high age of the top of the ticket. Trump is 74, Biden will be 78 in November. And what you are seeing is that, Mike Pence would be a much calmer, less incendiary version of Trumpism. He would be a little bit, despite his rise as sort of like a right-wing shock jock in like the 90s before he was a member of Congress, he would, it seems that he would just have a calmer stewardship. And Kamala Harris, I think it sort of revealed that we're not quite sure where she is ideologically. I think in some cases it was clear that she's a little bit to the left of Joe Biden, but she was trying to say, I agree with him. And I think it was revealing in that way.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's funny when you talked about his shock jock in the past. He called himself Rush Limbaugh on decaf, which is, I think, kind of exactly what we saw last night.
Interestingly, he hated Mulan, the animated version.
Well,
something that Alex and we have in common.
Alex and Pence hate Mulan. Great movie.
Wow.
Not sponsored by Disney, by the way. Just to be clear. We talked about this on our show last week when Biden also refused to answer this question on court packing, Tina. It seems clear that the campaign, it wasn't like a one-off, right? Like it seems very clear that this isn't something that they're going to answer. I want to give people a look at some of, I want to hear that sop from when she didn't answer. And it got kind of awkward for that question on packing the courts.
But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
No, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume if you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't seem like the campaign at any point is going to answer this question. It doesn't feel tenable. But what do you think the Trump campaign, you cover the White House and the Trump administration, what do you think they're trying to get at by continuing to press this question? What are they trying to get the American people to do?
First off, let me pull a Mike Pence for 3 seconds and say I've got a lot of feelings about Mulan, so we're going to discuss this afterwards.
Yes.
Second, what the Trump campaign is trying to do is essentially box Biden into adapting a position that has widely been seen as hyper-progressive. Court packing has been floated as a solution among Justice Democrats for ages. The reason that Pete Buttigieg started getting a lot of progressive support when he first ran was because he was the first to endorse court packing, essentially. Biden has clearly, said this is not going to happen. Kamala sort of said the same thing. But what the Republicans have been trying to do is frame this as the Democrats making an effort to destroy the Supreme Court because they can't get their way, and that the Republicans have clearly won the election, so Republicans get the prerogative, holding the Senate and the presidency, to put whoever they want in that seat. And by making the Democrats look to be sore losers, as it were, it does help Republicans in Senate races, and maybe it will help them with Biden. But that's why you see court packing allegations fly way more in close Senate races than you do the presidency. But, you know, it doesn't hurt Trump either.
Right. I'm going to ask you guys each of it to answer this with a yes or no. Did anything that happened last night change anyone's mind? Tina? Probably
not. No.
Alex?
Definitely not.
Yeah. Ryan?
Just to be counterintuitive.
Oh, God, some hedging. Always a hedge.
I mean, I suppose in the case that, you think Trump is a lunatic and extremely obnoxious, which is what all the polling and focus groups of the suburban women who are rebelling against him, that's kind of, they don't like him, right? And so I suppose, you look at Pence and think, oh, well, this is kind of a steady, more traditional conservative, maybe a non-zero percentage of the electorate might look at that and change their mind. But my real answer is no.
All that for a clean sweep. Time for another quick lightning round. This one is Draft Dodger. We don't do this a lot because it can get a lot of us in trouble in here. We all have very quick Twitter fingers on here, so I want each of you to go in your drafts and read off the tweet you wanted to send out that you knew would get you in trouble. So I would like to get you in more trouble by you saying it in front of people. Tina, how about we start with you?
Oh boy. This is okay, fine, I'll say it.
Oh my God.
I'm terrified.
I can't wait for Tina's
If the presidential debate was like watching my parents on the verge of divorce, the VP debate is like watching my parents running into each other at parties afterwards.
Oh. That's good. I think that might be the best one we've had. The bar is so much higher than for everyone else. Alex, how about you? You should have tweeted that one.
That could have been an 800-word column.
Not bad.
No, truly, that one was good. Alex, how about you?
Mine was, I look forward to Senate Democrats never interrupting Amy Coney Barrett in 2 weeks. I think Kamala is saying, I'm speaking was very much a tactic and not really it didn't seem to me a very genuine frustration with sexism. I felt it was just like a debate tactic. And I doubt Democrats in the Senate are going to reciprocate in kind in 2 weeks during the Supreme Court hearings with another woman. I don't think they're just going to let her filibuster. So I sort of like the way that she did that, I thought was a little frustrating.
I'm assuming that it's gonna be a lot of T-shirts soon, though, like the "I'm speaking."
I'm sure.
Why not? Ryan, how about you?
I have no idea what either of these were about, but this is my drafts. One just says "assume dear dead," and the other says "sad."
Sad. Oh my God.
And I don't know the context, but I'm going to send those after the show no matter what.
Those feel like a very 2020 tweet, both of them. Not really knowing what it is, but both very kind of depressing.
It was something that was happening in the moment that I've learned to be really careful with tweets that only make sense like during a live event.
Yes.
Then 5 years later, someone takes it out of context and is like, look what you said. Nobody remembers the very, very specific context of that 5 seconds when you were doing it.
Right. I did tweet out about the fly last night, and I'm worried that it's going to come back and bite me one day.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Never know. Maybe I'll be canceled. Don't cancel me, please. Last week, President Trump announced he had COVID-19. You guys all know this. There are still some key questions we don't know the answer to, most notably when the president had his last negative test result. But the president, he says he's feeling great. That's a quote after some experimental drugs and steroids. He's also continued to downplay the virus, even as more than 30 people reportedly are connected to the White House have contracted it. Because of his COVID contraction, the Commission on Presidential Debates announced the town hall next week between him and Joe Biden will be virtual. Biden says he's in, but the president had this to say about it.
I heard that the commission a little while ago changed the debate style, and that's not acceptable to us.
You're not going to participate?
No, I'm not going to waste my time on a virtual debate. That's not what debating's all about. You sit behind a computer and do a debate. It's ridiculous. And then they cut you off whenever they want.
Ryan, President Trump he's all about optics. So it kind of makes sense that he doesn't want to do a Zoom debate, right? Like a Zoom town hall. It doesn't feel as big. It lacks the pomp and circumstance that he really loves. But it also strikes me as a hard thing for them to try to spin and actually make sense to voters who want to hear what the president has to say.
Well, he's clearly not watching this show enough. He would know that virtual debates can be very elevated and a lot of fun.
So exciting, yes.
Look, remember what Trump says. One moment is not necessarily what will actually happen here. He didn't play this game as much this time around, but last cycle he was constantly threatening to pull out of the debates and playing all sorts of games. So who knows where he will end up in the next hour? Maybe as we're recording this, he's already backtracked. He's losing, as we keep pointing out, by high single digits, maybe double digits. He only has 2 opportunities to change this race, and those are those 2 more debates. There's nothing else. He has no money. His campaign is bankrupt, essentially. It's one of the reasons he went to New Jersey the other day when he had COVID, because he had to raise money. He basically risked his life because his campaign has no money. So I think that some of his advisors will probably explain to him that he can reach several tens of millions of Americans through the debate, and he's not going to be able to do that with some Facebook ads and YouTube ads and his Twitter feed. And so if he gives up the next 2 debates, it's game over.
Moderating. And it was Iowa right before Iowa, and he lost Iowa, right? So his track record of pulling out of debates, it doesn't seem to work for him. Tina, you cover the White House for Politico. What have you been hearing specifically about the outbreak that's been in and how it's been impacting White House operations, morale, especially now that there are reports that the president might even be going and working in the Oval Office, probably not wearing a mask?
It's really touch and go there, especially since the White House announced that they're not really going to be doing contact tracing. It's unclear how they're going to be able to test if they even want to be testing their employees for COVID, whether they're going to be encouraging them to actually stay home. I mean, maybe they will say that, but there will be enormous pressure from Trump himself to bring people back to work in the White House to, bolster his image. That's sort of why he was initially during the beginning of the pandemic, when people started wearing masks, he would reportedly keep telling them, take that off. Why are you wearing that mask? So right now inside the White House is a culture of fear, and among certain people, definitely a culture of anger that Trump brought this to their doorstep. I think it would be one thing if he caught it and then the White House locked down, took appropriate measures, but he is really ride or die on this, and it's for optics at this point. So, yeah, there's definitely going to be some resentment going on in that situation like that.
Yeah. Alex, who do you think this move, President Trump pulling out, it was just announced recently that there's going to be an ABC News town hall hosted by George Stephanopoulos that Vice President Joe Biden is going to participate in alone. So he won't be doing a Zoom debate with Steve Scully. Poor Steve Scully, who's been prepping. Alex and I were a part of the team that helped prep Tim Alberta for the PBS NewsHour political debate earlier. It feels like a million years ago, so I know how much work all of them have already done. Biden was largely seen as kind of the winner last week, right? And his ability to connect to people in town halls would actually play really well. So it seems like him getting his own town hall, probably let's say it's an hour long, that's probably going to play pretty well for him. You think?
Well, I mean, he's already done 2 previous town halls, and I think our colleague Mark Caputo called it an hour-long infomercial in the case of the NBC News one. Yes, he has done pretty well. Also, a lot of the questions that he's gotten in these town hall settings have been pretty easy. Now, the one thing I would say about the ABC News format is that when Trump did ABC News town hall with George Stephanopoulos just 2 weeks ago, the questions were a lot tougher, and we're going to be able to have like a direct comparison between the two. So I think it is possible that Joe Biden will do well, and it's a good format for him. But there's a reason why Joe Biden hasn't been doing a ton of like tough one-on-one sit-down interviews with national reporters. And it's because they're nervous about him making a gaffe. And I think there's still like a good chance in a national town hall like that he could mess up.
Alex, Tina, thank you so much for coming on the show, filling in for the nerds that couldn't make it. This is great. Thank you.
Out reporting.
Right, out reporting, allegedly reporting. I bet it's some really good stories. Exactly. I bet it's some really good stories coming out of that. Viewers, thank you so much for joining us. As always, you can watch us right here every single week covering politics as only Politico.